All right. I think we're live. Let's see what we got here. Hey, everybody, let us know if you can hear us. Where's everybody coming from? Somebody?
Anybody?
I think they can hear us, right? Is the music still playing? I don't know. No, it's good. Okay, look, we're live. Where are we coming from? That's the first thing. We're at Dev2 Next, or as I've affectionately started calling it, VenCom. Right, which makes more sense, right? It's like it should be.
That's
Like
very good, very good.
This is Dr. Venkat Subramaniam's. He's tried to launch this before, right? He had, remember, right in 2020.
Yes.
Famously, nothing else happened that year. He tried to launch the show, and I was all signed up. I was excited to go, and then the entire world collapsed. There was a pandemic on, so didn't quite make it, And but we're here now, and I'm joined by the one, the only, the amazing, the inimitable, Frank Greco. Man, it's good to see you.
How you doing, Josh? How you doing, everybody?
Hi, everybody. If you've ever been to a Java user group, you owe a debt of gratitude to this person, right? If you've ever been to the New York Java, you call it SIG, but can I call it a group, user group?
Yeah, it's a user group.
Right. Special interest group or user group, same.
Hey, we sort of kept the name because as an homage to back when we got started.
Newsletters?
There were SIGs, we had a user group, and if you have a special interest, that was called a special interest group of that user group.
Right.
So just as a homage to those, Sun user groups of that day.
Oh, wow. Okay, and that's and the reason we talk about that day is because it's not a new thing. Your SIG.
Certainly is.
It's the oldest user group / SIG for Java
ever.
Out ever. Yeah.
Yes.
When did it come out?
So when Java was announced in 1995 in September, late September, I think it was September 25.
Yeah.
So Sun Microsystems asked me, I was a consultant to Sun. They said, "Do you want to give a talk on Java?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What is it?" So they said, "Go talk to James Gosling, the father of Java." And I had talked to him about other technologies. Matter of fact, I was maintaining his News. He had a windowing system called News, Network Extensible Window System, which was way, way, way ahead of its time. I maintained that for AT&T, so I looked at his code. So that's where I knew James from. And so I talked to him, and I thought, this is just another language, right? Java is just another language. Okay, it's another C language. Okay. And then he explained it to me, and then I walked away, goes, "Oh my God, it's like, this is exactly what all big companies want." Right. So I got really excited. So they asked me give a talk on Java. I said, "Yeah, okay." So it was like an hour presentation. So it turned out to be the third ever talk on Java. James gave the first one. Arthur Van Hoff, his protege, who's extremely wealthy right now from all these, inventions and enterprise startups. And I gave the third one. So nice. That was in New York City, the day that Java came out.
Oh, can you imagine? That's a hell of a flex right there. That is.
It was, and I said, if anyone's interested in learning more, later on in the back rooms get together, and we had 4 people. 4 people, and now almost 30 years later, it's like we have 10,000 people, and we have now all social media things, so it's grown quite a bit.
That's right. 1995. Next year will be 30.
That's correct. I sometimes don't even want to think about it.
For reference, I was 11 in 1995. So wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I didn't even, I wasn't, I tried Java when it first came out.
Yeah.
Didn't understand it.
But when it first got started, and I was involved with the Sun user group community back then. And there was Sun user groups that we belonged to, and I ran the Sun user group in New York.
Yeah.
And what had happened is that we had all these talks on actually, to go back even further, in New York City, we didn't have too many tech talks back when I was, back in the day. All the good talks were on the West Coast. They were all in the Bay Area. And I said, "What? These are fantastic talks. Look
I
at
don't-
the internals of an operating system. There's GUIs and there's windowing system. Like we need to have it in New York. And what we have in New York, we're like mainframes and like CR, like 3270 terminals and like some Sun workstations. Like, but we need to have more of this information. PCs were, starting to become real popular. And I said, why don't we have it on the East Coast? And then somebody from the Bay Area, an engineer, actually a manager, said, well, there aren't any real programmers in New York. And, I had the WTF bubble went over my head. And I said, like, you know what? I'm going to bring people over here.
Yeah.
So I decided to, like, you know what? I'm going to start a user group, Sun user group. I talked to my friends at the big investment banks who are big customers of Sun.
Sure.
I said, like, give me a room. It's like, I'll invite people. So we started to have people come into the New York area. And then when Java came out, we had a special interest group of the Sun user group. That's why it's called a SIG. And as we progressed over time, the number of people interested in Sun sort of went down. They were mostly administrators. So I said, go off to the Linux administrators. Hey, Rodrigo. Hey, Cameron. So we just decided to have all administrators, the Unix administrators,
Right.
go off to the Linux user group, and we're going to continue with Java. So it just did this.
Yeah.
And
Because then you see that it's actually you're being buoyed by the popularity of Java, the language, not the Solaris side story,
Yeah, right, exactly. and that it was fun. It was a lot of fun bringing all these tech people and
I would say that today, actually, what you just said is really interesting and it resonates with me. My perhaps not hot take is actually I prefer to listen to the war stories of folks in high finance over the folks in cat picture website country. I don't care about your latest plugin for Meta, where I don't care. Like, I'd much prefer to listen to the people in London and Singapore and New York.
Well,
right?
the finance community, of course, they're always ahead of the curve because they want to make money.
Yeah,
Right.
and they're doing incredibly high-speed computing.
Right. It's cutting edge. That's why I
Yeah.
really liked working for an investment bank, because you were really at the edge of this stuff. Like,
Totally.
wow, cool stuff. Right?
So today, I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though I live in Silicon Valley, I live in San Francisco, just above Silicon Valley, I'm always interested in the stuff coming out of the East Coast. Always.
Yeah.
It's way more dollars to donuts, and it's the applied, because you don't know if it's real unless it's made its way there. You can get a lot of bull pucky ideas from Silicon Valley, but man, if a bank has productized it, no,
it's real.
It's real,
It's
and it's fast, and it's secure, and it's stable, and it's scalable.
That's
It
right.
has to be,
That's
or
exactly
it's
right.
not real at all.
That's right. So we brought a lot of people, a lot of technical experts. A lot of them were from the Bay Area, and to visit us because they had big customers. I figured, well, that would be an attraction for Sun to sponsor.
And there's some exceptions. I mean, James Gosling's from the Bay Area, lives in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah.
But like in general, the application of it.
Yeah, for the most part. Obviously, Boston's also another hotbed of
Huge
technology, and we had people, from that area visit us too. So we just continue to grow over time, and then I've been really lucky. Like we have a group of very, very talented leaders in the group.
Yeah.
Rodrigo is one of them. We have Neha. We have Gene Boyarsky, Barry Bird. We have so many people that I'm really blessed to have people run the group. I mean, I've been doing it so long. And now to have the next generation of people come in and take over. This is great.
I love that community for the win. I just lost what I was going to say. Oh, the spring team. We were blessed actually. The initial sort of, I mean, still, but throughout most of spring's history, we had two Marks. Dr. Mark Pollock and Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher, of course, is in Boston. Dr. Pollock in New York.
Right.
So, and two of the most incredible technologists I've ever had the privilege of knowing or working with.
Nice.
In those two cities.
Nice.
That
nice.
you just
Yeah.
mentioned.
That's great. Yeah.
And they're both Mark. So when Iron Man, when Tony Stark in those movies had the Mark II armor, the one with the suitcase, I think. I was fan of those two guys. Yeah. No, it's a great hub. There's also there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from back office trading. Just anything to do with the trading side of things is, to me, you hear the stories about people buying like multi-million-dollar plots of land just a few feet closer to the the market floor to do arbitrage and things like that.
Yes, right.
Just for the extra few milliseconds of latency that they get over the competitor.
Nanoseconds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no longer milliseconds.
It's just incredible what they're doing. People would be if you're not paying attention to New York, you're missing out on a lot of the interesting stuff. So so you created the Java user group. You've got this incredible group of people now. They're deputies, but you're trying to get them to become.
They're the leaders of the group. I mean,
yeah.
We have a leadership group, and we meet once a month to talk about what's about the next meeting. Or we have meetings now planned for the next few months, right? So it's exciting to have, and especially with AI being such a hot topic. We have a lot of AI centric talks. Obviously, they have to have a Java spin to the talk.
Sure.
But that seems to be the major theme right now.
There's no better. I cannot imagine doing AI in anything besides the JVM. If you're unless you're building your own model, right, which most people aren't, unless you're consuming it, there's no better language than the one that has dominated integration for so long.
Things don't change. So when I was working for an investment bank, so I sat nearby a bunch of, we call them quants, basically the data scientists of that. Yes, right. So, and they were brilliant people, these economists too. And I used to be fascinated. These guys are brilliant people. Mm-hmm. They were the crappiest programmers you ever want to meet, right? They would program in, I think that the tool of the day was like S++, and basically the Python of that era.
Sure.
And they would have all kinds of programming issues, and I would always get somebody would knock, in my cubicle, knock. Frank, you got a second? Could you take a look at my? And I was like, oh my God! It's like, okay, I think you need a loop for that. So, but these are brilliant people, but they're not. It's not they're programmers, right? Yeah. In from our perspective, right? So that's repeating now, right? There's a lot of people that are doing data science. Most people will never be data scientists,
right?
I mean, we know that. Most people are in the middle of the Gaussian curve. They're not data scientists. They never will be data scientists. It might be of interest in it, but they're not going to be a data scientist. You can be a user of a model. Right?
Consume and integrate.
That's right.
Exactly.
And what better language than Java?
There's not. And by the way, we talk about all the integration technologies. I say integration because I do want to cast back to the days of enterprise application integration and things like that. Even that, it was just dominated by Java. There's a reason. Where else is your business logic and your data? What is the service that fronts your data right now?
Right.
It's probably written in Java, right? And where's your business logic expressed right now? Probably in Java.
Exactly.
You'd be foolish to try and rebuild all of that on Python just to be able to connect to some perceived benefit.
And the education costs for enterprises to train their developers. Yes, you could do that, but it's a cost. It's an enterprise cost.
All to buy you something that you don't actually. There's not a perceivable benefit, and now your code's slower and harder to maintain for a group of people.
Right. Give me a REST interface and I'm done.
Yeah. And by the way, all these models have that, or an interface that's pretty standard.
99.9%. Yeah.
So I cannot even imagine. I think we're in a great place. Even Rod, Spring founder Rod Johnson, he's out there. He's saying exactly the same thing, right? Which I think we all are. It's the same drum, which is we are in a uniquely enviable position at the moment. Right, as Java people.
It is. JVM so people. We are in the early days of generative AI, not AI, but generative AI, right? Yeah. And of course, Python has its place for building models and doing experimentation.
And your notebooks and your experimentation, go for it. Python,
right.
Please.
But we're moving to the next phase, is putting it into production, right? That's the hard part. And what's Java's forte? Putting things in production.
Yeah, right.
So it's a perfect marriage.
Perfect
marriage. And we're at the right time. There's still a lot of issues to work out with AI, and a lot of them are non-technical. Some of them are more legal. Governance.
Did you see that bill in California? I think Governor Newsom is, for the moment, I think mercifully slow walking, or if not rejecting it, right?
Well, it's early days. Europe has their laws too, and people are complaining about that's too restrictive. We're in this early days.
I think there's a pendulum. You don't want the Wild Wild West. You don't want Skynet, but on the other hand, you can't clamp down on the very thing that leads to that innovation in the first place.
That's true, but we know that from the finance community, what happened in 2008, what happens in the 80s, when it's just go for it. The free market will take care of itself.
I'm not a laissez-faire AI guy. But I just think you can't make programmers accountable for the bad applications of the technology that they create. Like just like a Swiss Army knife, can you hold the company that makes a Swiss Army knife accountable for the knife if somebody else does something terrible with it, right? Like,
yeah, you don't, but still, you're wielding the tool, right? And you have to have some sense of responsibility.
I think the wielder should have the responsibility, right? The people building the tool, especially one is ambiguous in intent and in purpose as AI.
Yeah.
Like, unless I build the thing, like these models aren't intrinsically connected to the nuke codes, right? Like,
right, but I mean, so when you learn something in programming, whether it's Java or whatever language, and you hear about a new framework.
Yeah.
You hear about a new framework, and it goes, "This is cool." Like React framework, it's like this is it's great, but there's some drawbacks to it.
Sure.
Right? So it's trade-offs, and they go, "Oh, here's language models. Oh, great! Look, it can do this cool stuff. What's the downside? It can help somebody create biological weapons that can destroy people." It's like, okay, this is a little different, right?
Yeah,
So it's a powerful tool. It's an extremely powerful tool, and there's a lot of companies right now that are racing for market control, market dominance without thinking about that. So there has to be some sort of restrictions, just like there were in 08 in the finance committee, there weren't restrictions on on banks and how much capital you had, right? So we don't want to hit that same problem. And you hear you hear these people from big companies like OpenAI and Google. It's like, we actually don't know how these models work. We increase the number of parameters and everything. All of a sudden, it is emergent behavior, which is, of course, every sci-fi person's like, yes, emergent behavior.
But also the rest of us like, oh no, like a virus, you mean?
Right. So you just have to have some sort of constraints, not heavy duty ones, but some constraints, because some of these companies are thinking about profit and control, right? So you don't want. There are some companies I don't trust. Some CEOs of some major AI companies, especially certain people. Do you trust that person? I don't trust that person. I don't.
And you shouldn't have to in order to be able to do business. And sleep at night. Like
exactly.
It shouldn't be a function of like, I trust that person. It should be a function of I trust the framework in which that technology was developed, legally and technologically.
Right.
The regulatory framework and I'm with you on that.
There's all kinds of, and then for people say like, well, we're going to have open source. That makes us a good guy, right? We have open source. I said, well, this is a new world. Open source means something different in this world. It's not just the code, but it's the data. Data is the important part.
The thing that fed into the model in the first place.
Data is food for the language models, right? So where did you get that data? Did you get it legally? So if you tell me where you got it from and you got it legally, that is open source. If you don't tell me the source of the data, you are not open source.
Right. And so what you're getting is, that's like putting a compiled binary on GitHub and saying the code is open source.
Yeah.
Not exactly. I can't recreate the binary myself now. But on the other hand, I think right now, because you're talking about Meta, for example, it sounds like that's one of the things.
That's one. One of many open source, right? And so some companies who are not open source, they have an open source version. It's like, okay, I can look at the code. All the code is primarily, they all do this basic same thing. But what about the data?
Well, that's a great point. But on the other hand, I kind of understand. Look, I think most of us want to run the model and use it. The model itself, the data. If I could be confident nothing shady was done to acquire the data, I would be happy, even if I couldn't get access to the data. And the reason is, it took them some of these companies are spending billions of dollars to farm and build these models in massive undertakings. And it's just weird to think that they would open source that much IP.
Right.
That's different from open source code, where surely the code of any code of worth is going to take, it's not free. It costs real people real time, but it's still just a person or 10 or 100, not I need to build nuclear power plants to set up a farm of computers out in the desert,
right?
to build this model, as some of these AI vendors are now starting to do,
Right. But there are some vendors that some big cloud AI vendors are saying that, we know that there's legal issues and some people are reluctant to use our services because of, you're going to generate code and you put code into your application and later on that's going to determine that that was illegal and you're going to be sued.
Yeah.
So, but these big companies saying like, oh, don't worry about that. We'll cover you if that happens.
That's a bad
I said, to
posture.
me,
I just don't want to be in that position in the
I
first
said,
place.
are we dealing with the mafia? It's like, that doesn't sound ethical.
Protection racket. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't believe like there were certain CEOs of big companies said that. It's like, how could you possibly say that?
That's like saying, don't worry about it. Well, don't worry if you hit somebody with your car. We'll cover your insurance. You know, I'd rather not hit somebody with my car. Thank you. You know, like
I'm just stunned that CEOs of publicly traded companies would say that.
yeah, it is a bit of it's a wild west. It's a wild west at the moment. That's for dang sure, right? I wonder where things will land in a few years. Who knows?
Well, it was a wild west in financial community in 08 when I was involved with an investment bank, and we know what happened back then.
Oh yeah, not good.
Yeah,
not good. You know, and by the way, that was you and I are talking from the American perspective. Listeners and watchers will remember that the 2008 short-term mortgage loan collapse had a ripple effect on the entire dang planet. Like every economy felt it.
Yes.
Because of how bad it got here, you know. So we have to take. We can't. You're right. We can't be so
cavalier
right. With when the stakes are this high. But I do think there's some interesting. So assuming we can sort that out, and that's a big if, I do think there's some interesting opportunities here. You heard Oracle. Larry Ellison wants to have he's talking about building a nuclear power plant to build these data centers, and I think I heard somebody else is doing that as well. Like
Microsoft is doing it, and you know, Google's doing it, and then Canada is reaching out. It's like, if we have places where you can do this.
Can you imagine? I mean, we're building new. This is like, look, you remember Sun? They had a submergible data center, like a container, like an actual container, shipping container,
a physical container before they popularized containers.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so they actually had this is not what I think. Leave it to Sun to actually ship an actual container. It was so cool. It was a bunch of like Solaris and Spark machines in a container. And the reason was because it was cool. It literally cooling, you know.
It's like it was cool in a pure sense of the word.
Yeah,
it was cool.
It was cool. It was tempered, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, that was like an amazing thing, and I remember thinking, well, this is what started as a bunch of people assembling circuit boards and chips and whatever. We're starting to get crazy. We're starting to have like, why did they build that, right? The carbon footprint of the computing infrastructure was starting to become a problem. And we already understood that back in the days of Sun.
Right.
And that was 2006, right? Or 2005. That's the last. So, and we already understood that then. And now here we are 20 plus odd years later.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about building.
We're building mega, you know, sources of electricity. So, and then you ask these people, oh, wait a minute. Are you, you know, for climate change or against climate change? And I said, what do you mean? It's like, this affects the climate. What are you talking about? It's like, so you got to think about this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It has to be ethical. Then there's also like, you're all racing you're assuming that it's GPUs and it's chips and it's heat. But suppose somebody says, you know what? I came up with a technique that doesn't need matrix manipulation, and I don't need those chips, and I can get the same performance. How? Well, there are people at Stanford studying this stuff.
Okay, but right? So suppose we get there one day. Okay.
So the investment that you're making in changing the climate. Yes, you're getting somebody to write poetry with the language model, but meanwhile you're hurting the climate by doing that. But then
do we need like AI carbon offsets or something?
Maybe, yeah. So that's been an answer for a lot of things. So maybe we do something like that. It's you know, everything, there's always checks and balances and system dynamics. You know, if you ever study system dynamics, which everybody should, everything affects everything.
Yeah.
Right? And
Butterfly effect.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah. It's we live in a crazy world right now, man.
Yeah, it is a crazy world. Yeah.
I can't. Let's do it. We should check back in 6 months and a year. I just because it is, you know, every minute we check the news. You and I were just talking about how, look, you know, doesn't matter where you stand politically these days or where you stand in terms of all the science behind all this stuff. There's something to make your blood pressure go up in every news day these days, you know. And I was just joking with you before the show. I think like I wish my Apple Watch would give me like a split screen because it'll show me this terrifying headline and then it can also measure my blood pressure, and my heart rate.
Yeah.
And I wish it would just show me like the both. I see the headline, then
So, here's a picture of a funny cat.
right. And then the Washington Post pops up like, please stop it. What? And I did it to myself. I put this stupid watch on my wrist. Now I'm, I can't just ignore it. It's there. I should do something with it.
Yeah.
So dumb. We live in the Onion. I think they're going to go bankrupt. There's no, they can't make things up that are more absurd than what we live in.
But it's an interesting time for Java developers, right?
Amazing time.
And you have to learn about AI, generative AI. I mean, regular, predictive AI has been around for decades. I mean, right now, bulk of the money from AI is from predictive AI, like e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
Predicting what you should buy next, right? That's been predictive AI for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So now we're generative AI. Developers have to learn. It's going to be as important as an IDE.
Yeah.
You have to know how to use this stuff properly. I see so many people like using it, like ChatGPT, just typing in something and expecting an answer. It's it's wrong. It's bad, and walking away. Don't understand.
You gotta finesse the response.
You have to. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
There's context. You have to and sometimes the context gets polluted. You say, all right, clear the context.
Right.
So, yeah.
And by the way, that's a good point, which is that the context, the accretive value of the conversation produces the result. It's not
bingo.
Unless you're like overly specific, which is what you want. You want to be overly specific. Did you see that thread, by the way? Some AI doomer was talking about basically soon you don't need to. I don't know if this person was being. I don't know how thoroughly their tongue was deep in their cheek when they said this, but they said something to the effect of like, soon you won't need to know how to be a programmer. You're just going to need to know how to be very thorough in explaining to the computer what it should do. And then to which Grady Booch responded, we could call that person a programmer. Okay.
Yeah, Grady's pretty funny.
Oh, he's hysterical. And I have a second home in Maui, right, in Hawaii, and he's in Hawaii, so I feel like we could get along. Like,
but he admits it's clever technology. I mean,
sure,
right. I mean, whether it's what people are saying, it's like, okay, it's a little bit of a stretch. I mean, it's a tool. Use a tool like Word. You should use a tool.
Yeah,
right?
They have great applications.
Yeah.
Although I I don't mean to be that guy, but I'm officially the guy who. Maybe it's not Emacs, but when it comes like word processing, you're talking about Word, right?
Yeah.
I actually don't use word processing anymore. I've gone out of my way to avoid it. You know why? I think it's because I have ADHD or something. I don't know. I sit there and if I get bored, if I have writer's block, the last thing I want are buttons I can click on to fiddle with the fonts and the layouts.
Yeah. Just
give me a Markdown or AsciiDoc or AsciiDoctor, like.
Yeah. Usually if you're a writer, it's just, I want my brain to be transferred. I don't care about fonts and this and that.
Focus on the thing in front of you, not the periphery.
Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I don't use Microsoft Word. I actually get better results just dumping into Sublime or Emacs or whatever, and I'm wondering to what extent I would be better off by that same. I mean, I can't change the font in IntelliJ, but there is a lot of stuff I can fiddle with.
Yes, that is true.
I like the new stuff. The new IntelliJ's releases are all getting more Spartan. Just get out of my way.
Yeah, I do like the new approach. There are some things I need to tell them I'd like to have changed back, but overall it's really nice.
Yeah.
But the Java developers they really have to study stuff and learn it the proper way. And I'm trying to now. I've spent so much time. So I've been doing machine learning for a long time.
Yeah.
When I was an undergraduate and graduate many years ago.
I'm also
distant galaxy. It's like I'm also a musician.
Oh, nice. You know what? That's a great. You and Rod and so many other brilliant programmers and technologists have. I think
there's a connection between right because there's structure.
Yeah.
Right. There's structure, and we love structure. So my graduate project, my master's was I came across an article in Scientific American on fractal music. And I said, you could generate music from fractals. That's interesting by rolling dice and doing something, interesting. It's like, that's cool. And I said, well, I'm a musician. Like, can I extend that? Can I look at a style of a musician and create a new melody in that style? So that's exactly what I did. So I created a project that created this giant directed graph of probabilities based upon a melody. And it was really
It's
fascinating.
like auto completion for music.
Basically, it's like it was following notes and using fractal random generation to kind of go to the next place. And basically, it's generative AI way back decades and decades ago. So that was fascinating. And then, like, just for fun, I said, I should probably do a UI, do a GUI, right? And so I drew a musical staff, and I allowed the person to transcribe it because it's just numbers. You just like up and down melody. And then I give my presentation. Everybody was fascinated about the GUI. Nobody was interested in like really cool tree structure of probabilities and fractals. Everybody's like, look at a GUI, you can do this.
Like, you're missing it. Oh, that's a good point. We have this project called Spring Shell, right? And it's a shell. It's a tool for building CLIs. It's using native code behind the scenes, but it does work on all the platforms that matter, right? And on ARM, on Mac and Intel and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it has cursive support, read line, tab completion.
Oh, nice.
You can do tables, you can do dash hit, and then it'll prompt you with a bunch of options. I mean, it's really sophisticated shell.
Wow,
right?
wow.
And it's a whole it's a shell. You hit enter, the program runs. Now you're in a shell. You have a REPL. And you can contribute commands via Spring CLI, via Spring Shell, right?
Wow, I have to look into that. That sounds cool.
It is cool, and it's very empowering because, again, if I want to get something, if I want to build a utility, I could hire a React programmer and build do all this, or I just want the bare bones essence of it.
Right.
Here's a shell.
Yeah.
Just a shell, and of course, with GraalVM nowadays, that shell can be a native image.
Yeah.
It runs. Here's a Mac binary. Here's a Windows.exe. Here's a Linux one. Don't have to distribute the JRE, and it starts up in no time at all.
Right.
It's super useful.
Yeah.
That's my first go-to. Like
every programmer, you have to build a CLI just to understand you have to understand how a user is using your tool, and try CLI, and then have someone else use it, and then let them. You'll get this like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh,
and it's cheaper to fix that too.
Yeah.
You can sketch in a CLI or shell,
right?
Whereas in a UI, once you've gotten Figma, once Figma's involved, it's all fun and games until Figma's involved, right?
Right. Like, it sounds old-fashioned, but it really isn't. It really is.
Super useful.
Yeah.
Especially now that there are more things we can automate with computers.
Yeah.
The more utilities you want to build to abstract or obscure.
Yes.
That.
Right.
So you mentioned Java. What IDE would one have used in 1995? Like,
ooh, back then, I think we were still fighting the Emacs VI wars, right?
Sure, the war rages on.
That was a fun time.
I mean, there's NeoVim. Have you seen NeoVim?
Yes.
It's gotten. I'm an Emacs person.
Yeah.
And the reason I was an Emacs person to begin with was because, they shipped new features, whereas VI shipped every 10 years. So I was like, well, I think I know where I'm going to stand, But now this NeoVim community has reinvigorated that whole. That's really interesting. They've got language server support. They've got like a whole community of new plugins and everything. Oh, JEdit, Richard,
yeah, that's right.
JEdit, yeah, that's a good one too. Is that still out there? Can you download it?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, yeah. So with Emacs and Vim.
Yeah, that was
or VI.
Those were the tools of the day. I mean, as compared to today's standards, it's very primitive.
I mean, you can do Emacs with a language server now. You can use Visual Studio Code autocompletion in Emacs.
Yeah.
So it's.
I remember asking James Gosling. We talked about like his, version. I think it was called Gosling Emacs, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah,
right? And I was asking about it, and he said the biggest feature of that was making it extensible. He said that is by far and away he said, when you think as a developer, when you build a system, you have to make it extensible.
Sure.
Have plans for making it extensible. So that was a cool tip from James.
It seems like he's going to go places, that James. He's got a bright future ahead of him, I think. That guy's going to do big things. Yeah. He just retired.
Yes,
Did you see
that's
that?
right. I know. I sent him a congratulations.
Yeah,
yes.
Likewise. That was.
I wanted to thank him for my career.
And
paying for my mortgage. Thank you, James.
James Gosling, man. Here's to the legend. I'll drink actual proper spirit later tonight, but although I suppose it's I feel like coffee is probably
That's appropriate.
appropriate
Yeah.
for him uniquely. It seems like it's appropriate. Okay, so you would have. So we mentioned JEdit. Actually, that's a good point. I think for me, the community, the Java language was so very obviously great, and the reason it was so obviously great was that it sparked a gold rush of what Daniel Hannemeyer Hansen, who for the most part I tend to disagree with, but he calls them the merchants of complexity, right? And so you get all these vendors who are, you know, I mean, the early 2000s were fraught with, well, you know, I was never a big WebSphere fan for obvious reasons, but then you get the WS Star world that seemed to be mired in the Java ecosystem. They were not one and the same, but a lot of that started with the Java ecosystem. Then you get, you know, these even the complexity of the tools. We went from Emacs and Vim to JBuilder.
Yeah.
And then JDeveloper, you know, and so now we've, I think, gone full circle. Now, if you look, we're just talking about the very simplified full presentation view inside of IntelliJ. Like it's just a text editor at that point, right?
Yeah, I think, but that's, you know, speaking of AI, that is a pattern that you see with a lot of things. That some things, and it happens, and this is part of my talk tomorrow, is like I've seen that in nature and the complexity theory, where some things start out very elegant, simple, and all of a sudden they start growing and getting more, and the complexity level gets bigger. And then, like in astronomy, if you study astronomy, stars get more complex. They start pulsing, right? Until they get to a certain point and they explode.
Yeah.
And things get back down to a simple thing again.
A level.
Yes, that's right.
They obtain a level.
That happens in music. It happens in astronomy. It happens in mathematics.
Right.
It happens in computing. Right. So basically, you can't just say this happens just in computing. No,
I didn't. But I just don't. I'm glad to see that behind us. I'm glad that we seem to have returned to a level again where, like, the simplest thing that can work often does. Where you see the IDE has gotten less complicated, not more. Even though it can do more, it's less in your face.
That's the essence of Java. When Java came out, we were dealing with build systems in C and C++ back then.
Oh, make.
And it was like make and Ant and like.
Ant. I forgot about Ant. I try and block that one out. And, hey, executable XML. Let's go jelly. Turing complete XML. That's what I asked for Christmas.
And that level of complexity for enterprises was just like a star pulsating. It's like it's going to explode, and it did explode. And here came Java.
Wasn't that the joke, right? Duncan Davidson. What's the difference between the creator of Ant and the creator of what was the other one? I don't know. And then the answer was Duncan Davidson has apologized. You know.
Well, it was an attempt, right? It's an attempt.
We all used it. It got me over a lot of production. Like actually, Ant was. I think I like most people had a blessed Ant build that I just copied my cargo code from one project to another, you know, and then just extended.
Good genes.
Yeah, this is like it's like a skillet that has all the grease that's built up over lots of years, and you don't want to clean it because you lose the flavor, you know. So this for me the big simplification was Xdocklet, EJB docklet originally, but then Xdocklet, right? The idea that we had this meta model, we could transform Java code into other code, you know, and that was all through Ant.
Yeah. And
so actually one of the reasons I had trouble moving to Maven in the very beginning was because I had to like call this EJB docklet / Xdocklet monstrosity.
Yeah.
I had to use the Ant plugin from Maven to call in Ant, and it was just a nightmare.
Yes. Complexity level was high. Yeah.
But then since the technologies that required Xdocklet or EJB docklet in the beginning, well, they have since dramatically improved. Or disappeared. And so I didn't need that anymore.
Evolution.
Yeah.
Evolution works.
Oh yeah. So okay. So we're in a good place now. I think. What are you excited about? Because you just said something I'm still stuck on in my mind. 30 years. What does that look like in the next 30 years? Are we doing quantum computing Java? You know, like.
Well, it's a good question. What's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years?
Even that.
Because we're seeing new types of language model come out like that purport to say that they reason. Grady Booch might say that it's not reasoning; it's just like a data structure,
right?
Data structure. But they're creating some interesting results. And we're just in the early days. So the whole world of a software developer is going to change over the next 3 to 5 years. And it's not just code generation. Code generation is just the tip of the iceberg.
Sure.
Because we talk about, everybody talks about, we're going to no code. The guy who's Jensen from NVIDIA, no code.
Jensen,
well, of course he's going to say that. He's a sales guy.
Right.
He's the number one sales guy for the company. But there's other things that programmers do other than generating code.
Sure.
There's tons of stuff, right? Not to mention the non-tech stuff like answering your boss's emails and meetings and all this other crap. So Gen AI is going to affect all those other things too, over time. So it's not just code generation. Code generation is probably the simplest thing because there's a structure to code, right? So, but it's going to affect the rest of that. And if developers aren't prepared, their career is going to be impacted by it. So you have to learn all this stuff in addition to
wield it. Don't be afraid of it. That's a great point. You mentioned it's going to affect all that other stuff to the extent. So, okay. Assuming we don't make, because, if you buy a new house and you have more space in the house and you have, like, let's say you moved from you saved up your money, you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Now you have a 2-bedroom home. Does that extra bedroom stay empty the entire time you're there? Of course not. You're going to fill it up, right? So I'm a little naive when I say the following, which is AI is going to simplify things so that we have more time to work on the code. But I think also, being a little bit less naive, we're going to probably give ourselves more work to do now that we have simplicity abstracting away the existing work, right? Or making easier that existing work. So I don't know, but I do wonder if this work. I wonder if this work, is this in our phone? I was talking about Apple Intelligence, and that's looking pretty slick, and it's in our computers. If you can embrace that, if you can actually wield those tools, and because I think they did a study, right? I saw a study the other week or whatever, a few months ago, where they talked about people who are, they used Copilot, something like that. I forget what. I wish I could remember the details. And it was like they found that it had the most profound impact on younger developers, relatively more novice developers. And whereas paradoxically it had less of an effect, but still some effect on the more senior people.
Yeah, exactly right. So younger developer, when they use the language models, they get this much more productive. The senior developer gets maybe this much more productive. Right. It's very, very helpful. Having a very smart intern working with you. But what I'm worried about is that before that, the young learners, how does this affect them? Right.
Well, that's what I'm worried about. Because you can see the problem here, right? If we are disincentivized to hire senior people, then who's going to teach the younger people?
Right.
We need the younger people.
You need the apprenticeship and you need mentorship, right?
Right.
Because who's going to lead the companies of the future, right? It's like a language model.
No,
I don't think so.
And also, I do find that having AI makes my life a little bit more accessible insofar as I don't have to go to Stack Overflow, right? But I also know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
If you're just doing unstructured, like exploring the space kind of programming where you don't have no idea what success looks like, I don't find it makes me particularly,
right.
It doesn't really.
But what really scares me is that as an educator, I talk to the senior developers how to use language models. Okay, there are obvious ways, but I'm getting questions from young people who haven't decided where they want to be a developer. I don't think I want to move into this world because my job is there's no jobs in a few years. They're not going to be jobs, so I don't want to be a developer.
Don't say that to people.
But I'm getting more and more of those questions from students, and it's scary.
That is scary. Yeah. I would
it's
say,
not just like saying bring a developer over to the Java world. No, it's like bringing new developers. They don't want to be developers because they figure it's a dead end job.
I think that's like saying I don't want to be a plumber just as people start installing toilets in their houses. Like you're going to need more people, man. You're going to need more people to fix that stuff, not less.
Yeah.
It's more things that can go wrong. You want your plumber on hand. I'm not saying programmers are like plumbers, because plumbers actually work hard, and they do a valuable thing for the community. Whereas we building cat picture website people are a little bit less, We need the plumbers. Anyway,
Yeah, that's what scares me the most. It's like the next generation of developers and
Being disincentivized,
right.
discouraged.
And it's hard. And of course, as teachers, how do you teach this stuff? Because teachers are already overburdened. They're
Oh, I know.
already overburdened. I say like, okay, well, students are going to use language models to cheat. So now you have to devise mechanisms to do anti-cheat. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, there are obvious ways, but it's more work for a teacher. And then they have to learn how to use language models tools. It's more work for the teachers. So it's where these are problems. I mean, there are business opportunities for companies, but these are problems that we solve.
Just look for the word delve in the essay. Instant fail.
I need to get a T-shirt.
Right.
Delve.
Delve. Surely. No, but you're right. But also on the other hand, yeah, kids need to learn to read and write. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I do think we should make accommodations for the opportunity that comes when you embrace. Like these kids it could be a force multiplier, assuming they have the foundations. I don't think it should be a thing to be shunned or banned from the classroom. Quite the contrary. I think
No, not at all.
You know, it could be a force multiplier, and then it could give kids who would lack that, because what is it like? 15% of Americans graduate high school illiterate.
Yeah.
I mean, something like that. Is that maybe the numbers changed? I don't know. But my point is, it's an abomination as a number, right? It's just we are not doing a great job of perpetuating literacy and basic functions for society. And so could we close the gap with AI? Could that help us do things that might get people more interesting?
It could be. I mean, there are some cutting edge professors that, I know at Wharton, Ethan Mollick has been using. He tells this is not just the graduate students, is that you have to use AI.
Yeah.
You have to. And he gives assignments that if you don't use AI, you're never going to finish it. So he forces people to do that. And he says he's getting really phenomenal, so your startup ideas. Everybody, he's running a startup class, and he said that it's phenomenal what the ideas are that the language models help, right?
Yeah.
And it's only going to get better. But that's just that's just one professor out of many, many, many thousands, right?
So let me ask ChatGPT. I'm going to fact check myself here because I don't know. I want to make sure that number's still valid. Because I could be wrong. This is the nice thing about this. What percent of people in America graduate high school illiterate? Sorry, I'm asking ChatGPT. Somebody says, I think it starts at the universities. If I could spend less than an hour to use AI to write a program in a language like Java, why not, instead of spending a day doing that? Yes, but I don't think it's going to write the whole program. I think it'll write the algorithm. Like if I need Fibonacci. Wow. Okay, the number's worse in some ways. So ChatGPT, which searched for websites, but again, I don't know if I trust any of it. Okay, whatever. Yeah. I'm just going to relay what ChatGPT told me, but take that for the giant.
Remembering
giant
ChatGPT is not a search engine.
Right.
Right. So
and search engines
that's
are
very,
also
very,
poisoned.
very important.
Right. And
it's not a search engine.
And also search engines, like, good data lots of data doesn't mean the good data will rise to the top. It just means that there's lots of data, right?
We're dealing with the internet.
Yeah. Okay. So huge, giant building-sized grain of salt here. Approximately 21% of adults in the United States are considered functionally illiterate, which means that they struggle with basic reading and comprehension skills. This includes a significant portion of high school graduates who read below standard proficiency levels. While not all are completely illiterate, many have literacy below a 6th grade level, making everyday tasks like filling out forms challenging. So imagine the force multiplier, because you don't need, ChatGPT is not, it can do 6th grade level kind of stuff, right? It can do that. If you can talk to it, and you can for a lot of these AI models, there's a voice option. I'm using the ChatGPT desktop app, and they just announced this. They just finally, I haven't even tried it.
Use the app on the phone. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Can you do the thing like in the demo where they showed that demo a few months ago, where they had like a camera trained on something?
Yes.
And you can ask it, "What am I drawing?" And it can.
It's mind blowing with some of the stuff it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So imagine the possible opportunity there. I'm not saying it's going to get you through your thesis on, fractal music generation, but it could definitely help you fill out this stupid form you got to fill out.
Oh, yeah. It's a tool.
It's a tool.
Again, you use a tool where you need to use that tool, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm worried about again, that's the younger developers, not just developers, but the younger people, the next generation.
Yeah.
To use this stuff effectively and ethically, right? And because we can't even get teachers to teach Java. Right, because it takes too long to learn object-oriented programming. It's
getting better. I can't wait to see that change.
I know, but we have to scale, right? And how do you scale this? And then now we're talking about language models, and we're talking about right. You
got services, security.
Oh my God. And then how does the average teacher? And I'm talking to you. I talk to all you fellow teachers. They don't have any time to do what they're doing now.
Oh,
so it's
not like they're being paid. I feel so bad for teachers, especially in the modern world. Like there's a sense of, what is it? Confucius had teachers as like either the first or the second highest rung of society, right? And so there's this sort of sense of a teacher should be revered. They should be top of the hierarchy, in terms of social stature, right? And you get to the merchants who are just selling other people's work, and they're like the bottom rung, right? They add nothing to society, But now, in so much, if you look at today's world, and we're celebrating the wrong people. The teachers should be up at the very top of that stature.
But that's been true for decades, right?
True.
Is that going to change? I'm not sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying. All that to say, one sympathizes with these teachers who are overwhelmed, dealing with a consistently growing topic,
right?
And have to do so with less money.
But it's, what, Josh? It's interesting that we're talking about that, and here, two Java developers, and we're talking about a new technique that we're going to use, and we're talking about social problems with teaching. And so this is what AI is doing to people. It's making them think outside of what you're doing, how this affects everything else, which is very, very helpful. Yeah. Very, very helpful. Because sometimes Java developers tend to be shoegazers. And they say okay, what tool? Get the tool. Yeah. Tool. So what are we building at? So tell me more about what we're building and why we're building it.
Shoes, not just stare at them,
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's a cool technology. This is interesting time for everybody on the planet.
Absolutely. Well, I sure hope we make it. On that bombshell, this has been a really great conversation.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, my friend. New York Java SIG chairperson, legendary Java champion, contributor to all things Java, the history.
Null pointers.
The band.
The band, null pointers.
Great musician, and just sparkling, charming person overall. Frank Greco. Hope you got something out of this, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Well, I'll be doing more live streams. We're at VenCon. We're at Dev2 Next in Denver, Colorado, or just outside. I think we're not strictly speaking in Denver, but
close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah.
So
off by one.
Yeah. So okay. Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye.